In a small town in Ohio, 25-year-old Michael had been in a committed relationship with his girlfriend, Jessica, for 2 years. Jessica, 22, was a vibrant and outgoing individual who had a close relationship with Michael's family, especially his father, Richard, a 50-year-old businessman. The two families often spent time together, sharing meals and celebrating holidays. Michael and Jessica's relationship seemed perfect on the surface. They shared common interests, had mutual friends, and were often seen as the ideal couple by those around them. Michael trusted Jessica implicitly and had no reason to doubt her loyalty. Michael worked as a software developer at a local tech firm, while Jessica was finishing her degree in marketing at the nearby state university. They had met at a mutual friend's barbecue and hit it off immediately. Within 6 months, they were living together in a cozy apartment on the outskirts of Oak Ridge, their hometown of just under 30,000 people. "You're so lucky," Michael's coworker Tom would often tell him. "Jessica's gorgeous, smart, and she actually gets along with your parents. That's like hitting the relationship jackpot." Michael would nod and smile, feeling genuinely fortunate. Richard, Michael's father, owned a successful chain of hardware stores across 3 counties. He had built his business from scratch, working long hours when Michael was growing up. Now semi-retired, he acted as a consultant while his management team handled day-to-day operations. This gave Richard plenty of free time, which he claimed to spend golfing, fishing, or helping out around the community. "Your dad's been so supportive with my business class project," Jessica mentioned one evening as they finished dinner. "He's been giving me all these great insights about retail marketing strategies. We're meeting tomorrow at that new cafe downtown to go over my presentation." "That's great," Michael replied, genuinely pleased that his girlfriend and father had such a good relationship. Dads always had a soft spot for mentoring young people. These mentoring sessions became more frequent over the following months. Jessica would often return excited about some new business concept Richard had explained or advice he'd given about her future career. Michael encouraged these meetings, believing they were beneficial for Jessica's education and career prospects. At family dinners, Michael noticed the occasional lingering glance between Jessica and his father, but dismissed it as shared enthusiasm for their business discussions. When Richard would compliment Jessica's intelligence or appearance, Michael felt only pride, not suspicion. "Jessica's really something special," Richard said during one Sunday dinner, raising his wine glass in her direction. "If I were 30 years younger." He joked, trailing off with a wink. Michael's mother, Linda, laughed lightly. "Down, boy. You've got your own beautiful wife right here." Everyone laughed, including Michael. No one noticed how Jessica's eyes stayed locked with Richard's for just a moment too long. The first real hint came during a weekend getaway to a local winery with friends. Jessica received a text that made her smile in a way Michael hadn't seen before, a private, secretive smile. When he asked who it was from, she quickly replied, "Just my study group," and put her phone away. Later that night, she claimed to have a headache and went to bed early, but Michael noticed she was texting someone under the covers until she thought he was asleep. One evening, Jessica returned home late from what she claimed was a night out with friends. Michael noticed she smelled faintly of a cologne he recognized but couldn't immediately place. When he asked about her evening, Jessica was evasive and quickly changed the subject. "Just the usual. Drinks at Hartley's, then Sarah wanted to check out that new place on Main Street," she said, heading straight for the shower. Nothing exciting. This uncharacteristic behavior planted a seed of doubt in Michael's mind. Jessica had always been open about her activities, often sharing funny anecdotes or gossip from her nights out. Her sudden reticence felt wrong. The next day, Michael casually asked his friend Jake, whose girlfriend was in Jessica's friend group, about the previous night. "Girls' night out?" "No, I don't think so," Jake replied, looking confused. "Sarah was with me all evening. We had dinner with her parents." Michael felt a cold sensation in his stomach but said nothing more. Perhaps Jessica had been with different friends, or perhaps Jake was mistaken. He didn't want to jump to conclusions. A few days later, while Jessica was in the shower, a message popped up on her phone from an unsaved number. Had a great time last night. Can't wait to see you again. The familiarity of the message and the secrecy surrounding it unsettled Michael further. He decided to investigate. Part of him felt guilty about invading Jessica's privacy, but the inconsistencies were adding up. While she was busy preparing dinner, he quickly checked her call history. Numerous calls to and from an unnamed contact, often lasting 20 or 30 minutes, appeared several times a week. These calls typically occurred during times Jessica had claimed to be in class or studying at the library. Michael created a mental log of Jessica's excuses over the next week. A study group meeting that ran late. Coffee with a professor about her thesis. A shopping trip with girlfriends where she returned without any purchases. A yoga class from which she returned with perfectly styled hair and makeup. Each excuse was delivered with increasing nervousness, her eyes rarely meeting his. The woman who had once shared everything with him now seemed to live a parallel life. The final confirmation came when Jessica claimed to be attending an overnight marketing conference in Cincinnati. Michael called the hotel where the event was supposedly being held, only to discover no such conference existed. That same evening, his mother mentioned that Richard was on an overnight business trip to meet suppliers. Heart pounding, Michael accessed Jessica's phone while she was packing and discovered a series of messages exchanged over several weeks. The conversations were intimate and suggested an ongoing affair. To his shock and horror, the messages were between Jessica and his own father, Richard. "Can't stop thinking about you," one message from Richard read. "Yesterday in my office was incredible. The way you looked at me." Jessica had replied, "I know it's wrong, but I can't help how I feel when I'm with you." Michael suspects nothing. The realization that his girlfriend and father were involved in a clandestine relationship devastated him. The betrayal cut doubly deep. The two people he trusted most in the world had conspired behind his back, likely laughing at his naivety. Michael spent the night at a hotel, unable to face Jessica, needing time to process the magnitude of the betrayal. His mind raced through every interaction between Jessica and his father, reinterpreting glances and comments that had seemed innocent at the time. How long had this been going on? How could his own father do this to him? When he returned home the following evening, Jessica was waiting anxiously. "Where were you?" she demanded. "I've been worried sick. You didn't answer any of my calls or texts." "I know about you and my father," Michael said quietly, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. Jessica's face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" "Don't," Michael interrupted, holding up his hand. "I saw the messages. I know you weren't at any marketing conference yesterday." Confronted with the evidence, Jessica broke down and admitted to the affair, expressing deep remorse and claiming it was a mistake that spiraled out of control. She confessed that she had been drawn to Richard's charm and maturity, but never intended to hurt Michael. "It just happened," she sobbed, reaching for him. "I was spending time with him for my project, and then. I don't know. He made me feel special, understood. But it's you I love, Michael." It was just physical with him. It meant nothing. Her words only intensified his pain. The thought of them together made him physically ill. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Jessica hesitated. 3 months, she finally admitted, though something in her eyes suggested it had been longer. Feeling betrayed by both his partner and his father, Michael decided to confront Richard. He drove to his parents' home, where he found his father alone, working in his home office. Richard smiled when Michael entered, but his expression quickly changed when he saw his son's face. "You know," Richard said, not a question but a statement. "How could you?" Michael asked, his voice breaking. "Your own son's girlfriend. What kind of father does that?" Richard, caught off guard by the direct confrontation, admitted to the affair but attempted to downplay its significance. He apologized, stating it was a lapse in judgment and pleaded for forgiveness. "It was a mistake, son. A terrible, awful mistake, Richard said, his usual confidence absent. Jessica is a beautiful young woman, and I lost my head. It won't happen again. We can move past this. Move past this? Michael repeated incredulously. You slept with the woman I love. You betrayed not just me, but Mom too. Does she know? Richard's silence was answer enough. I'll tell her everything, Michael threatened. Please, Richard said, suddenly desperate. This would destroy her. 34 years of marriage, Michael. Think about what you're doing. You should have thought about that before you started sleeping with my girlfriend, Michael replied coldly before leaving. The betrayal caused a rift within the family. Despite Richard's pleas, Michael told his mother everything. Linda, upon learning of the affair, was devastated and filed for divorce after 34 years of marriage. Family gatherings became strained, and relationships were irreparably damaged. Michael ended his relationship with Jessica and distanced himself from his father. The emotional trauma left him unable to trust, questioning every relationship in his life. He withdrew from friends and threw himself into work, spending long hours at the office to avoid his empty apartment where memories of Jessica lingered. Weeks turned into months. Michael learned through mutual friends that Jessica had moved to Columbus, supposedly to finish her degree at Ohio State. Richard had moved into a downtown apartment after Linda forced him out of their family home. Linda herself called occasionally, her voice always tight with controlled anger and grief. 6 months after discovering the affair, Michael found himself at a crossroads. The pain hadn't diminished, if anything, it had crystallized into something harder and colder. He realized that simply walking away and trying to forget wasn't enough. Something inside him had fundamentally changed. The betrayal had transformed him from a trusting, optimistic person into someone calculating and wary. One evening, after a particularly difficult day where he'd spotted Richard and Jessica together at a restaurant in a neighboring town, confirming they were still seeing each other, Michael made a decision. If they had collaborated to destroy his happiness, he would return the favor. Not with direct confrontation or violence, but with something more lasting, a carefully orchestrated plan to dismantle both their lives piece by piece. Michael began by gathering information. He hired a private investigator to document their ongoing affair, collecting photographic evidence and details about their meetings. Simultaneously, he cultivated a friendship with Richard's business partner, gradually revealing selected details about Richard's moral character without explicitly mentioning the affair. It's just hard to trust someone who can betray their own family, Michael confided during a golf game with the partner. Makes you wonder what else they're capable of. Next, Michael focused on Jessica's academic career. An anonymous tip to her department head about plagiarism in her thesis proposal, with fabricated evidence he meticulously created, resulted in an academic investigation. While not enough to get her expelled, it placed her under intense scrutiny and delayed her graduation. For Richard, Michael's approach was more financial. Using knowledge gained from years of family discussions about the business, he identified vulnerabilities in Richard's company. An anonymous letter to the IRS suggested irregularities in the company's tax filings over the past 5 years. Though Richard had done nothing illegal, the resulting audit was costly, time-consuming, and damaged relationships with suppliers who became nervous about the company's stability. Michael strategically reconnected with his mother, offering emotional support while subtly encouraging her to seek maximum financial compensation in the divorce. Linda, still hurt and angry, needed little convincing to fight for her fair share of the business she had helped build while raising their children. As his plan unfolded, Michael maintained an outward appearance of someone working through his grief. He started dating again, joined a gym, and appeared to friends to be moving forward. This facade served 2 purposes. It prevented anyone from suspecting his involvement in Richard and Jessica's mounting problems, and it positioned him as sympathetic in the eyes of their shared social circle. 8 months into his calculated revenge, Michael learned that Jessica had been denied a promising internship after the potential employer received an anonymous email detailing her history of unprofessional relationships. Richard's hardware store chain was struggling under the weight of legal fees from the audit and divorce proceedings, forcing him to sell 2 locations. The final phase of Michael's plan involved their relationship itself. Using the evidence collected by the private investigator, he created a detailed dossier of their affair, including timeline, locations, and proof that it had begun while he and Jessica were still together. This he sent anonymously to Richard's remaining business associates, Jessica's parents, and selected members of their community. The fallout was swift. Jessica's parents, conservative Midwesterners who had always treated Michael like a son, were horrified by their daughter's behavior. Richard's reputation, already damaged by the divorce and business troubles, was irreparably tarnished. Several long-standing business relationships ended, with clients citing moral concerns about continuing to work with him. As Michael watched the consequences of his actions unfold, he felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. The revenge he had so carefully orchestrated was working perfectly. Richard was losing everything he valued: his reputation, his business, his community standing. Jessica's promising future had derailed, her academic credibility questioned, her family relationship strained. Yet the satisfaction Michael had expected to feel remained elusive. The execution of his revenge had consumed him, becoming a hollow substitute for the relationships he had lost. The person he had become, calculating, secretive, manipulative, was unrecognizable from the trusting young man he'd been before the betrayal. At a chance encounter at a local coffee shop, Michael saw Jessica for the first time in nearly a year. The vibrant, confident woman he had loved was gone, replaced by someone who looked tired and defeated. For a moment, their eyes met, and he saw recognition there, not just of him, but of what he had done. No words were exchanged, but something passed between them, a knowledge that the cycle of betrayal and revenge had transformed them both into people they never intended to become. Walking away, Michael wondered if true healing could ever come from causing others pain, no matter how justified. The question lingered, unanswered, as he returned to his empty apartment, the dossier of evidence still open on his laptop, with more plans yet to be executed. He sat at his desk, finger hovering over the send button that would release the final, most damaging revelations about Richard and Jessica to the world. Would this final act of revenge bring him peace, or just push him further from the person he once was? The cursor blinked, waiting for his decision. That night, sleep eluded Michael. Images of his father and Jessica together haunted him, intermingled with memories of family dinners and shared laughter that now seemed like cruel mockeries. By dawn, he had made his decision. He closed the laptop without sending the final evidence, not out of mercy, but because he had conceived of something more devastating. Instead of exposing them further, he would reinsert himself into their lives. The following week, he called his father and suggested they meet to talk. Richard, desperate to repair their relationship, readily agreed. "I've been thinking a lot," Michael told Richard at a quiet corner table in a bar far from their hometown. "About forgiveness and moving forward." Hope flickered in Richard's tired eyes. "I never thought you'd want to speak to me again. I've lost so much, Michael. The business is barely staying afloat, your mother won't even look at me, and most of our friends have chosen sides," her side. "That must be difficult," Michael said, maintaining a carefully neutral expression. "And Jessica? Are you still seeing her?" Richard hesitated before answering. We've been supporting each other through this. But it's complicated. The age difference, the circumstances, neither of us planned for any of this to happen." "I understand more than you think," Michael replied. "Sometimes we don't choose who we fall for." He paused deliberately. "I'm not saying I forgive you, but I'm willing to try to rebuild some kind of relationship. You're still my father." The relief on Richard's face was palpable. Just as Michael had anticipated, his father was so desperate for redemption that he didn't question this sudden change of heart. Over the next several weeks, Michael orchestrated a careful reconciliation. He suggested family therapy sessions, which his father eagerly embraced. Michael used these sessions strategically, appearing vulnerable and open while actually manipulating the therapist's perceptions of both Richard and the situation. "I've realized that my father has always had difficulty with boundaries," Michael shared during one session. "Growing up, he would appropriate anything I valued, my achievements, my ideas, even my girlfriends before Jessica would comment on how he'd flirt with them. I think I normalized it because it was all I knew." The therapist noted this pattern with professional interest, and Richard's denials only made him appear defensive. Each session subtly shifted the narrative away from a one-time mistake toward a pattern of predatory behavior. Simultaneously, Michael reached out to Jessica, suggesting they meet for closure. Surprised but hopeful, she agreed. "I didn't expect to ever hear from you again," she said when they met at a quiet cafe. She looked thinner, shadows under her eyes suggesting sleepless nights. "I needed time," Michael explained, "to process everything. I'm not saying what happened was okay, but I understand people make mistakes." Jessica's shoulders relaxed visibly. "I've wanted to apologize properly for so long. What we did, was unforgivable. But I need you to know that I did love you, Michael." "I believe you," he lied smoothly. "And I think this experience has taught me a lot about myself too. About forgiveness and moving forward." Over several more meetings, Michael carefully rebuilt Jessica's trust. He asked questions about her life with seemingly genuine interest, sympathized with her academic struggles, and presented himself as someone who had processed his anger and was moving toward forgiveness. "How are things with my father?" he finally asked during their fourth meeting. Jessica looked uncomfortable. "Complicated. He's different now. Angry a lot. Drinking more. The business problems and the divorce have hit him hard. Sometimes I wonder if we made the biggest mistake of our lives." "That must be difficult for you both," Michael replied, concealing his satisfaction at hearing about their troubles. The final phase of Michael's revenge began at a dinner he orchestrated, inviting both Richard and Jessica to his apartment under the pretense of formal reconciliation. They arrived separately, each visibly nervous but hopeful. "I wanted us to try to put the past behind us," Michael explained as he served the meal he had prepared. "Life's too short to hold on to hatred." Richard raised his glass. "To new beginnings. Son, I can't tell you what this means to me." Throughout dinner, Michael skillfully manipulated the conversation, subtly highlighting the differences between Richard and Jessica, their age gap, divergent interests, different life goals. He asked pointed questions about their future, knowing from his individual conversations with them that they had conflicting visions. Jessica mentioned she's been offered that internship in New York, Michael commented casually. "Such an amazing opportunity." Richard's expression tightened. "We're still discussing that. Nothing's been decided." "I thought you were supportive," Jessica responded, confusion evident. "You said just last week that I should consider it." "That was before I knew it was for 2 years, Richard countered. "We need to be realistic about maintaining a relationship with that distance." Michael watched the tension build between them, occasionally adding another calculated comment to fuel their insecurities. By dessert, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. As they left that evening, Michael observed the physical distance between them, the strained conversation, the lingering doubts he had planted taking root. He had identified the cracks in their relationship and methodically widened them. In the weeks that followed, Michael continued his strategy. To Jessica, he emphasized Richard's controlling tendencies and hinted at other young women who had caught his father's eye over the years. To Richard, he suggested that Jessica was using him as a stepping stone for her career and had been making inquiries about positions at their competitors. The relationship that had once destroyed Michael's life began to crumble from within. No dramatic confrontations, no public scenes, just the slow, inexorable erosion of trust. The very foundation of their affair, secrecy and betrayal, made them particularly vulnerable to suspicion and doubt. 3 months after that dinner, Jessica accepted the internship in New York and left Ohio without saying goodbye to Richard. Richard, convinced she had been planning to leave all along, retreated further into alcohol and bitterness. The hardware store chain filed for bankruptcy protection, decades of work collapsing under the weight of legal fees, divorce settlements, and Richard's increasingly erratic business decisions. Michael watched it all unfold from a careful distance, no longer actively participating but occasionally hearing updates through mutual acquaintances. The calculated revenge had worked perfectly, perhaps too perfectly. Both Jessica and Richard had lost nearly everything, their affair ending not with passion but with quiet resentment. Yet as he sat alone in his apartment on the anniversary of discovering their betrayal, Michael felt hollow. The past year of planning and executing his revenge had consumed him, leaving little room for healing or moving forward. He had become as secretive and manipulative as those who had betrayed him, and the realization was unsettling. Michael sought therapy to cope with the emotional turmoil and leaned on close friends for support. Over time, he began to heal, but the scars of betrayal remained. The experience taught him the importance of trust and the devastating consequences when it's broken, not just for the betrayed, but also for those who choose vengeance over forgiveness. As he prepared for a job interview in another state, a fresh start far from Ohio, Michael packed away the last pieces of evidence he had gathered. The dossier that had once represented justice now seemed like a testament to a dark period he needed to leave behind. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "I know what you did. And I understand why. For what it's worth, I would have done the same." There was no signature, but Michael didn't need one. Some wounds never fully healed, and some betrayals echoed across years. But perhaps, he thought as he deleted the message without responding, it was finally time to write a different ending to this story, one that wasn't about betrayal or revenge, but about reclaiming the person he once was.